So I made an amazing classroom management plan and now my admin doesn't like it. What do I do? That's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Well, welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. Why are we here? Because we don't believe that our spiritual walk and teaching profession should exist in two separate domains. Rather, the hope we have in Christ should change how we approach everything, not just at home, but at school as well. So join us as we explore both the spiritual and practical sides of key teaching challenges, integrating them together so we can succeed at teaching, glorify God, and make a lasting difference in our students' hearts and lives. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. We also want to thank our sponsor, Graceland University. Graceland University prepares educators to lead with purpose by combining academic excellence with a biblical worldview. Their specialty is in helping amazing paraprofessionals earn their teaching degree in a unique way that is, first of all, affordable, and secondly, works with their school schedule and responsibilities. Find out more at graceland.edu. I'm here today with Amanda, one of our Teach for the Heart team members and Teach for the Heart Plus mentors. Amanda, thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
And Amanda is going to be joining us on this conversation where we're talking about what to do if my administrator is not supporting my classroom management plan, or honestly, this could also be expanded to kind of any disagreement that you're having with administrator. And Amanda, can you share before we get into it just a brief idea of your experience you've been a teacher, but also on the administrative side?
Yes. So I have been on the side where I was a teacher and I had to have some hard conversations with an administrator because we didn't agree. But I've also been on the other side where I was the administrator in charge of leading school, and I disagreed with some of my teachers on some things. And so, we had to work through it and really figure out how we can come to an agreement with both sides that work for the teacher, for the school as a whole, and for the students.
Right. And I really love that Amanda's going to join with us, like I said, because she understands both sides. And we really want to consider both sides. That's one of the first things in disagreement is, right, you have to really try to understand. So before we get into some of our tips, though, we were just thinking that this really is a tricky thing, right? And we've seen this come up in different ways. I know in Teach for the Heart Plus, we work with teachers in Classroom Management 101. They work really hard on their classroom management plan. And sometimes they go to implement their plan and then they're like, oh my goodness, my admin says I can't do this or I can't do that. And they're like, now what do I do? So that's one thing that definitely comes up. Amanda, what kind of situations have you seen?
Yeah, so we actually had this conversation in one of the Teach for the Heart Plus coaching calls where a teacher worked really hard on creating this classroom management plan, but then her admin thought that some of the techniques that she was using, that it was a little elementary for her middle school students, like, counting down from 10 or having them line up. And the teacher did have an elementary background. And so it seems like the admin was just shutting it down, saying, that's too baby. We can't do that here. But then they weren't really giving any support as to, well, I like this idea. Let's see how we can make that work for a middle school class instead. So that's just one of the examples that I was able to help someone work through.
Right. So yeah, takes all shapes and forms, but no matter what your disagreement is or what you're hearing from your admin, I think this is going to be really helpful. And if there's any admins listening, I hope you guys also find this conversation really helpful, just to kind of talk about some of the things that might be going on, that disconnect that might be happening. And that's actually the first thing we want to talk about is our first piece of advice. If you are finding that there's some type of disagreement, your admin saying, you can't do this, or you're sensing something, my first big tip, and we're going to dive into this, is continue to dialogue with your administrator. Because even as Amanda was just alluding to, a lot of times, not every time, but I would say 90% of the time, there is some type of misunderstanding. Sometimes there's a big misunderstanding that just needs to be cleared up, but sometimes there's just nuance that isn't understood. And so it really, really is worth your time and effort to try to really understand what is going on. You might misunderstand what they are expecting of you, and they might misunderstand what you're doing. So it's really worth doing that. So a few tips I have in this regard. First of all, it's important to explain why you're doing what you're doing and how you believe it will help. Okay. So, and by the way, tip before this, it's really great to be proactive. It's great to go with your, classroom management plan to your administrator before you start implementing it and say, hey, here's my plan. Can you take a look? Let me know if there's anything you think we should discuss, because then it's collaborative from the start. But regardless, whether it's ahead of time or you're in the middle of a situation, explaining, hey, this is why I did this, and then asking the admin for their feedback on it, right? Discussing sticking points.
Yeah.
And then, really kind of getting into that with them and discussing it.
Mhm. Yeah, and even if you may have an admin that is a little unapproachable because they may be busy, or maybe your personalities just don't mesh well, and it's kind of intimidating to go and talk with them. Find someone in your school who does have a really good classroom management plan, or someone in your school who the admin, you can tell that they really respect that teacher, and have them view it and give feedback before you take it to your admin or before you start to implement it. So that way, it's just another level of being proactive with making sure it's something that your admin will agree with.
Yeah, that's a great tip for being proactive. And then if you are finding that your admin is saying, hey, I don't think you should do this, or this isn't a good idea, one of the things to do is, once again, continue the conversation, get clarity on what they mean, and ask for suggested alternatives. Okay. So ask specific questions. So, for example, let's say an admin that says, you're not allowed to have kids do their homework in recess. So you need to ask clarifying questions. Okay. So if a student doesn't do their homework, they never do it. Am I never allowed to have them do it in recess? Do you have any other suggestions for what I should do instead? Like, talk about it with them. Because I think what happens a lot is an admin will say something and the teacher will just hear it and be like, frustrated, upset, and they'll just go on their way. And then there's all kinds of nuance and question that never got discussed, and the teacher is frustrated, and and honestly, sometimes the things teachers tell me their admins told them, I'm like, they either have an insane admin or this teacher is not understanding. And as I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
think they really understood what they meant. There needed to be more fleshing out of what
Yeah.
did that mean, and that provides opportunity then for the admin too to clarify, oh no, I didn't mean that, I meant this. And if you still
Hmm.
are like, I don't know how to do that, that I can't figure out how to make that work, going to your admin and saying, hey, I'm really stuck. Can you explain? That either gives an opportunity for the admin to say, oh, yeah, just do it like this. And you're like, oh, I get it. Or for the admin to realize, oh, I am putting them into a corner. Maybe we need to find an alternative solution.
Yeah, and as a way to kind of prevent that misunderstanding from happening, I would advise against teachers like finding the admin in the hallway when they are, on a mission walking. The teacher may see it as, oh, there's my admin. Finally, they're not talking to somebody. Let me ask them a question. But that admin has something on their mind, and they may be very blunt and very direct because they have to get going. And so to not try to bring up heavy conversations when it's just a passing when it should be just a passing conversation. And also on the other side, if your admin does say something to you, like when, they're in passing, and if you don't really understand the purpose behind it, or maybe you're like, that didn't really sit that well with me, it could be they didn't mean it that way. Again, for the admin, you also shouldn't have deep conversations as you're trying to pass by somebody, because a lot of misunderstanding can happen during those times.
Yeah, that's a really good point, right? These conversations are best had in the office when you don't have
Yeah.
a class in 5 minutes. Yeah, schedule them for those times. Or just ask, hey, can I meet with you? Here's my
Hmm.
free hour after school, whatever the case. Really, really good point. And then my last tip on here is, if there is something specific that you feel like you need your admin's help with, ask for it specifically. Don't just wish they would do it or hope that they realize, for example, if you say, man, I really need a place to send disruptive students, make that ask, make it specifically. Say, hey, here's why I need this. Is there anything you can do? And that doesn't guarantee that they'll do that, but it'll start a more helpful conversation, that you can, and who knows what could evolve out of
Yeah, I agree with that.
that. Amanda, any other tips on just that dialogue and disagreement? And then we'll move kind of talk about what to do when you've talked it out and you just disagree.
Yeah, I would say whenever you go into any sort of conversation with anybody, whether it's a parent, a student, or an admin, you should go in with the mindset of, I'm going to be a peacemaker. And for that, you need to understand what a peacemaker is. A peacemaker is not just somebody who, puts out the fire and walks away. Like, it gets to the root of the problem. And in order to be a peacemaker, when you're going into talking with your admin, you have to go in humble and not just with the mindset of, I I know what's right. I know how I want my classroom to run, so the admin, they're just gonna have to deal with it. And also, admin, you can't go in with the mindset of, what I say is going to happen, right? Because that's not creating peace. And so going in with that mindset of I'm going to be a peacemaker, that means that I'm going to listen to what my admin is going to say. I'm going to try and apply it, truly try and apply it, not just say, well, I tried, it didn't work. Truly try and apply it, and also present your case in a humble way as well. So whenever you go in with that peacemaker mindset, because the Bible says, blessed are the peacemakers, the whole outcome, whether it's how you wanted it or not, you're going to walk out of that conversation with a level of peace that you wouldn't have if you were going in there with just the mindset of, I'm going to change their mind to get them to approve what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, that's a fantastic tip. And that reminds us, too, that we should be praying about this, right? If we
Yeah,
know, especially if we
absolutely.
know, hey, I have to talk about something we disagree with, asking God to give you the words, give you the peace, the
Hmm.
patience, all of those
Yeah,
things, and demonstrating the fruit of the Spirit in your interactions. That's great.
yeah,
And there's so much more we could say, but I hope that gets you thinking in the direction of like, man, I need to clarify this. I need to have those conversations first before assuming that we have a strong disagreement. But
yeah.
sometimes you have those conversations, you clarify it, and there's still a disagreement. It's just, okay, this is what is expected. It is different than what I think is best, and they're just different. And now what? This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. And I have to tell you, I just went to a Herzog event last week, and it was just amazing to see how much God is doing in education at large, but specifically at the Herzog Foundation. They are really pouring into particularly Christian schools in an incredible way. And if you're teaching at a Christian school, you should definitely be checking them out. In particular, take a look at their amazing lineup of free trainings. I mean, even lodging and meals are included for free. So you definitely don't want to miss that. Another resource that everyone can enjoy no matter where you teach is their Faith and Freedom 250 video series, which tells stories of faith, sacrifice, and courage from America's history. So please check out these and so many more resources at herzogfoundation.com. That's herzogfoundation.com. Now back to our conversation. And before we get into this, an acknowledgement that this is a vast spectrum. Sometimes you have an absolutely amazing teacher and an absolutely amazing administrator, and you just see differently on this issue. That is part of it. There's also the whole other side of the spectrum where you might truly have a really poor administrator, or an administrator might have a really poor teacher. And that is a lot more difficult when there's not that trust. And it's just like, this is just
Yeah.
bad. But I think regardless of where it falls on the spectrum, there's some things that can help. And the first one is just to remember that scripturally before God, we are called to honor authority and treat others with respect, right? So there is responsibility to be honoring in our interactions. We don't have the authority to be insubordinate or violate a direct order unless it contradicts scripture, unless we're told to, do something that is wrong. We are called to submit and to obey to the authority in this respect. So we need to keep that in mind first and foremost, as we're having, kind of figuring out what's next.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that mindset can also be, unless you truly understand and really think about what it means to honor your authority. Some people can think, oh, well, I can't make a case for myself, or, well, it doesn't matter what I'm going to say because I have to do whatever they say, whatever they want me to do. But that's not entirely what it means. You can definitely stick up for yourself, and you can go to bat for yourself as long as you do it in a respectful way.
Yes, right. Such a good point. Being respect, it's how you do it and
Hmm.
your attitude as you go about it,
Yeah.
navigating those differences. So, first of all, we want to be honoring, we want to be respectful in our interactions. We want them to go bad mouthing them to everybody because we
Yeah.
disagree with this thing. So, that's first of all. Second, Lou, even though we are like, okay, I have this requirement, I need to follow it. I've tried to talk, we're stuck here, this is where we are. But yet, we should also seek what is best for our students. So, what I see
Mhm.
sometimes with teachers is they say, okay, this is the requirement, this is what I'm told to do, this is what I want to do. And I guess I just can't do what I want to do. I guess I'm stuck in this horrible version of what it's doing. And instead of doing that, what we need to do instead is say, instead of saying it's hopeless, I guess I'm stuck doing the horrible option, we need to ask, how can I still accomplish my goal while also doing what the admin has asked, and get creative and almost always there is a way to do at least 80 to 90% of what the goal you're trying to accomplish and still meet that requirement. So you need to get creative and not see it as a either or between what you wanted to do and what you're being told to do, but instead ask, okay, how can I, under these parameters I'm given, accomplish the goal or do what is best for my students?
Yeah, because oftentimes the admin, they see the big picture things, right? They see the whole school culture. They see that 5 year strategic plan down the road, like where they want their profile of a graduate to be. Where the teachers may not be thinking about, oh well, whenever this kid graduates in 8 years, they need to have this skill. But the admin, they have to think in that mindset, always thinking ahead, always having a bigger picture. Where the classroom teacher, especially whenever it comes to elementary school teachers, because they are with those students pretty much all day, right? And they have all the subjects where they can see all the little nuances of each student. And every year the whole personality of your classroom changes because you have these new students, but yet the school culture and the school values, those typically don't change from year to year. Right. And so the admin can see the bigger picture of things. Teachers are seeing the small picture. And so working together and seeing how your small picture can match that bigger picture, there's definitely common ground between that. So it's
Yeah.
just getting creative on how you can make those work.
Right. And every situation is totally different. This is something that in Teach with Art Plus, we work with our work with our members and kind of help them figure that out. But I'll give two examples. One that we've worked with the teachers and one from my personal life. One is a lot of times one common restriction, especially in public schools, people are getting these days is no consequences. You're not allowed to have any consequences. And it's just like this blanket restriction. And another side tip here, remember to only restrict yourself to the actual restriction. Sometimes you hear the restriction and you actually expand it. So get clear on what the actual restriction is. But for example, in this is things, no consequences. Okay, you can't have consequences. Well, now you've got to get creative. Well, if I have a reward I give my students, they earn this thing and certain students don't earn the reward, well, that can serve really the same as a consequence, right? Not technically taking anything away, but I'm not giving them what they didn't earn, right?
Yeah.
So you're just getting creative. Okay, I'm going to, is it semantics? Maybe, but you're meeting the requirement and doing what is best for your students, right? And kind of working that out. Another example, this is not so much in classroom management, but when I was teaching, I had a lot of kids on their homework that were just not following directions, just doing it, all wrong. No heading, not showing their work, all these different things. And so at first, how I handled that was I took points off. But my admin called and said, hey, this is against school policy. You can't take points off because this is not an academic issue. This is like a procedural issue. And at first I was kind of frustrated by that. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? If I don't take points off, I'd tried that before and it was just disaster. It got crazy. But I said, instead I said, okay, let me be creative. I'm not allowed to take off points. What can I do instead? And I said, okay, I'm going to make them redo it instead. Like you can't turn this in. You just have to redo it the right, with the heading, with showing your work, with using pencil, whatever it is. And that actually ended up working better. So just kind of recognizing like sometimes when you're given something and forced to innovate it can actually turn out better. I didn't just say, oh, I guess my kid's work is just going to be horrible then. I instead went back and found a different solution. So,
Yeah. An example that I have, there was a teacher that I was working with at a different school actually, and she was talking with me and just kind of sharing her struggles. She's a very creative, very fun, very outgoing type of teacher. And she was wanting something to do for her students that finished their work early. And she had this idea of she had these little like trinket things that she put around the classroom and hid them all around the classroom. So that way, whenever the students finished, they could go and they could have fun and they could find these little trinkets. And the trinkets had like little tasks on them to do. And so it was like brain work and logic puzzle type things, which was great. It was fun. The kids loved it. The kids were all finishing their work early. But the problem is that the kids were all finishing their work early now so they could do these things and they were rushing. But then the kids who were very diligent in making sure they read out every single thing, that their handwriting was perfect, they were getting really distracted because the kids in the classroom were running around all over the place. And so I had to be kind of blunt and just tell her, listen, I like the idea of what you're trying to do. Give something fun for the students who do finish early instead of just giving them extra work to do, more worksheets. Just read quietly. And it's a very creative way, but I think that you need to find another way to use that creativity and make it better, more conducive for the entire class. And so we did work out a way to where the students could still do those little, brain puzzles and things. They did it in a small group off on the side because she was very adamant how she wanted those kids out of their desks and out of their seats whenever they finished. And so we made like a little corner, so it wasn't nearly as disruptive. Now that what it still wasn't perfect, but we have to realize that God made everybody unique and made everybody different with different talents, and our brains are different. The way we think is all different. And so, we can't expect a copy and paste or a cookie cutter classroom management plan for every teacher and for every classroom. We have to let them, use their unique abilities. And it may look a little different than somebody else, and you may not fully understand it as an admin, but you sometimes have to let it play out and see how it works.
Yeah. And I think that's just a good point to remember what just in general in all these things, right? Is that like I said, occasionally there is just a really rough really rough administrator, or from the admin's perspective, a really rough teacher. And that's just going to be very challenging. And God is with you and can help you in that. But
Mhm.
in a lot of cases, you're just bringing two different perspectives.
Yeah.
And that is frustrating sometimes when you're like, but I love my idea. I love what I'm doing. But recognizing that like it really can be iron sharpening iron. And it can really
Mhm.
be, if we work together, it really can produce something better because the teacher's seeing things the admin doesn't see, and the admin seeing something the teacher doesn't see. So start from that place of partnership and say, okay, we are partners. We do want the same thing. Try to solve it together, and then obviously go from there.
Yeah,
And then one
absolutely.
final tip I have, and then I'm going to get some final tips from Amanda, is if you're in a situation where you need something from an admin, for example, back to the example I gave, man, I really need a place to send a student that's being disruptive in my class and I can't calm them down. And the admin is just like, we can't. Like they're either unwilling or unable to accommodate you and help you with that. You can try working with fellow teachers. So you might go to another teacher and do something that's allowed, but just say, hey, I really need someone to send my student. They need a place to calm down that's not my room. You need a place too. Can we each have a place in the back of our room? And we just know, we're across the hall. We'll send each other to each other's rooms. They can calm down and then head back, and we'll just help each other with that. So just get creative. And sometimes the teachers can work together if something that the administration is not supportive of, or just doesn't have the mental and, time to
Mhm.
address that issue. That's one other thing you can do.
Yeah. I would say my two final thoughts, we kind of touched on this one a little bit, is if you have an admin that is not supportive in certain areas and you're not receiving the help that you need, is to find another teacher. See if you can observe them. That's a
Mm.
really big thing because, like you said, iron sharpens iron. You can learn a lot from other teachers in your classroom. Like they are the professionals that you can learn from in your building. And so see if you can observe them. See if they can come into your class, and they can observe you, and you can receive help from them for certain things. If again, if your admin isn't as supportive as what you need them to be and is helpful. And also you can ask your admin to come in and demonstrate how they would do it. That kind of does two things. It gives you some more ideas, but it also gives a chance for your admin to see your perspective with what you're dealing with as well. Because as much as we would like to say, we as admins, like, oh, we know all the struggles. We are out of the classroom for a little bit of time. And so it is always good to get back into the classroom so you can experience those classroom management problems firsthand. But invite your admin into your room, invite your admin into your planning process, and to see how they would do it.
Yeah. Oh, those are amazing tips. Amanda, thank you so much for being with us and talking about this with us today. And those of you listening, if you say, man, I want some more help with this. You talked about things. We mentioned a few things. We mentioned Classroom Management 101. If you want more info about that, you can go to teachfortheheart.com/CM101. We've also mentioned Teach for the Heart Plus, where we have mentors that we answer questions like this on a regular basis in our coaching calls and on via our support inbox. So if that's something you're interested in, you can get info at teachfortheheart.com/plus. And you can use the code podcast on both of those for a discount. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us. We really enjoyed having this conversation. If you found it helpful, please do forward it to a friend, a colleague, an administrator, and kind of continue the conversation there. This episode has been brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. All views and opinions are our own, don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. We look forward to being with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember, God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.